Christian Basics Lesson 16, the sixth commandment, you shall not commit adultery. Whew. Ba-boom. In the fifth commandment, you shall not murder, the Lord protects the gift of life. Now the Lord protects that thing which is right next to us, the most kind of the closest thing to us, and that's our spouse. That's the gift of marriage, and that's what the Lord is protecting here with the sixth commandment, and he's doing so by handing us over to a life of chastity. You shall not commit adultery. This establishes the Christian sexual ethic, and this is a big one because we live in the great age of sexual freedom. We live in the great age of, hold on a minute. Would this be helpful for you guys? It's not money, but there's some stuff like that in there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We live in the great age of the sexual revolution, which prizes above all else the gift of sexual freedom. So this is not maybe one for the kids. We think that our greatest right as human beings is the right to have my own particular type of orgasm, and everything has to bow to that great sacred right. And if anybody would stand against my own expression of sexual freedom, then they have to be plowed over. This is the reason. It's just kind of crazy that in our day, the kind of the trouble that comes in the church is trouble that comes around the sixth commandment, because we say, hey, marriage is a man and a woman committed to each other for life, and that is like apparently the most radical and hateful thing that you could say to somebody. It's amazing. It seems, I can think of a lot of more radical and hateful things to say than that. But boy, that really gets people's ire up. So this is what the sixth commandment has to do with. It has to do with it has to do with the fact that we are created as sexual beings, that we are created male and female, that the Lord has divided up the human race into two different categories, the man kind of man and the woman kind of man. That there is that there's differences between men and women, and that those differences show up especially in the part about having babies. Now, there are two various different competing pictures of marriage in the world today. It's there are what's called the compatibilism, or a comprehensive view of marriage, and then there's the kind of romantic picture or view of marriage. And these two are in conflict with one another. The romantic view of marriage is this. Sorry, I gotta get some lunch too. Man, this video has a lot of interruptions. I'm glad that you're sticking with me through this whole thing. The romantic view of marriage says that marriage is the most intense emotional relationship that two human beings have. And it's the public expression of that most intimate romantic relationship. It also has to do with sexuality and sexual expression, which is why it's called homosexuality instead of homofrenduality. There's that emotional intensity is to be expressed in our sexuality. That's the romantic view. And if there's two guys who love each other, then if our understanding of marriage is a romantic view of marriage, then how can we possibly say that they can't be married to one another? There is, on the other hand, the comprehensive view of marriage. Could I get 4 McDoubles, 2 of them with no onions?
Okay.
And that's all.
Okay, your total came out to $8.64. Thank you.
Thank you. They're not all for me. The comprehensive view of marriage understands that there's a emotional but also a biological thing going on in marriage, and I think maybe the best way to think of it is like this. If you could, just to recognize that we are in ourselves mostly, like our bodies are self-contained. So like I can eat and drink and sleep and feel and move around all by myself. I've got a complete skeletal system, complete...
A64, thank you.
Thank you. A complete digestive system, a complete nervous system. All these systems are complete except for one, and that is the reproductive system.
Have a good one.
Thank you. The Lord has taken my reproductive system and yours and everybody else's, and He's divided it in half. And He says, you get half, and the ladies get half. And it doesn't work unless you put the two together. It has to do with two becoming one flesh. It's biology. So you can't have a family and you can't have babies unless you have a dude and a lady. Now, I would just so that the comprehensive view of marriage is simply recognizing that biological reality, like humanity is recognized for the last forever, as long as we've been having babies, that this is important. That this has to do that our lives are not just for ourselves, but also for the next generation and everything else like this. And so there's the institution of marriage. It's the no onions that hold them up. So always, I mean, from all of human history, marriage has been a man and a woman in some way.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to give you this picture. If you could imagine that instead of dividing up our reproductive system, just imagine if God, when He created us, had divided up our digestive system, so that you could have a baby all by yourself somehow. You know, there you have a baby. Everybody has a womb, and everybody has everything you need to have a baby. You can do it all by yourself, but you can't eat by yourself. The Lord gave, let's do it like this, that the Lord gave mouths to all the women and bellies to all the men. And so to eat and digest food, you had to have a man and a woman, and they had to kind of cuddle up next to each other, and one would chew and the other would digest. Now, if you just imagine that was a situation that we lived in, and you could eat and then you'd stand and go to work and do whatever like this. Well, you know what you'd have if you had that situation? You'd have something that looks an awful lot like marriage. That a man and a woman would be living together, that they would commit their lives together, and that twice a day they'd have breakfast and dinner probably together, because you can't eat otherwise. And let's just say that if you just had a different man or woman, a different mouth or belly, that you would get sick and all sorts of trouble. Well, you'd be committed to that person for the rest of your life. Now, let's imagine in that sort of situation that there's two guys that came along and say, well, you know, we really love each other, and so we want to be married to each other. And you just look at them and you say, guys, who's going to eat? You just don't have the right parts for this whole endeavor. It doesn't even, for the idea of two men or two women being married, just for when the comprehensive view of marriage, it just doesn't even, it's like that does not compute. So we see already, just even biologically, and through all these other kind of orders of society, that marriage sort of, it just takes shape. Now the Lord knows that we are lustful, and our lust takes a lot of different shapes. There's a money lust, it's greed. There's the power lust, it's kind of the fame lust sort of thing. There's a rebellious lust, and there's a bloodlust. But chiefly, our lust shows up here with our sexuality. We have a sexual lust that is always pulling us away from this original shaping of marriage by God. It's always attacking that sort of thing, and so the Lord knows that it needs to be protected. So He gives us the sixth commandment: "You shall not commit adultery." You should be committed in your life, in what you say and what you do, to this institution of husband and wife. Now, there's a lot of ways that this gets attacked. There's a lot of ways to sin against the sixth commandment, and it seems like we're inventing new ways to sin against the sixth commandment. Like every 10 minutes, we're inventing new ways to break this commandment. And even in the Old Testament, it's listing all the kind of various different disgusting ways that people can break the sixth commandment. But the chief thing is that the Lord is calling us to chastity in marriage, to abstinence, which is chastity on the outside of marriage as well. So Luther explains the commandment like this: we should fear and love God. The sixth commandment, you should not commit adultery. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we live chaste and decent lives in what we say and do, and husbands and wives love and honor each other. So that's the sixth commandment. And now I can be a hater on YouTube because of it. But we want to rejoice that according to the sixth commandment, that the Lord has given this very unique and beautiful shape to our human sexuality that is to be expressed in the Lord's gift of marriage. That's Teaching Christian Basics, Lesson 16.